This video is going to be showing you how to check a crank and a cam sensor. And the best way to check a crank and a cam sensor is with an oscilloscope. So I'm not going to take the time to show you how to set up the oscilloscope. That'll be done at a different time. But at least you'll be able to see the process on how to check a crank and a cam sensor. The first thing you need to do is you need to find out, look up the service information and find out exactly where the crank and the cam sensors are located. I've already done that on ProDemand, and I found that the cam sensor is actually located down here on the front part of the engine. So this wire harness right here that comes up with the green, the red and the black wire goes into this connector. That is the cam sensor connector. And so what I've done is I've back probed the signal wire on that sensor, and I've hooked that wire there up to channel A on the oscilloscope. And then down here for the crank sensor, it's the same thing. This engine actually has two crank sensors, and one of the crank sensors is right here in the front of the engine, and this is the connector that goes to it. And so what I've done is I've back probed the signal wire on this crank sensor, and then I hooked it up to channel B on the oscilloscope here. Now if you look at the oscilloscope, I've got channel A, which is the blue line, and channel B is the red line, and both of those channels are the top one's going to be the cam sensor, the bottom one is going to be the crank sensor. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the engine so that we can see the crankshaft and the camshaft sensor working together. So go ahead and crank it over. Looks like I lost the signal on the camshaft. So my signal came loose on the camshaft, so I just fixed it. So on the crankshaft, that's the red lines right here. And if you notice, there's a whole bunch of pulses on those. What that's doing is it's telling the PCM that the engine is actually running, that it's turning. And each one of those is going to represent probably a piston. And then the camshaft, that's this little hump that's going across here in the blue. That's going to represent where number one piston is. And so this right here tells me that everything is working fine on the crank and the cam sensor. So what you would be looking for on a signal is, say for instance the cam sensor signal looked something like this. And as you're looking at this on the oscilloscope, what you're looking for is nice sharp edges that go up and down and across. And if you see any kind of jaggedy stuff like that up here, or maybe it doesn't go all the way up, or whatever the case may be, that's what you're looking for to make sure that it is working or it's not working. So a good clean signal is going to be nice square wave pattern. So you're going to have nice square edges as it comes up and down, and that it's actually going to be working. One of the things you want to make sure you look at is that you're actually getting a signal. So we know that the cam sensor works, we know that the crank sensor works on this engine, so that concludes the cam and crank sensor demo.